I send nearly 1,000 emails every single week through my agency Blue Horizon AI. In this video, I'm going to show you the exact setup that we use to generate thousands of leads and enrich them using Apify and Make.com. And what we get as a result is this big and juicy list right here. I'll first walk through how it works and then build it in front of you so that you can import this into your Make.com scenario and start using it yourself. So let's get into it. Alright, so let me first walk through how exactly we use it by showing this simple Figma board here. So typically what we like to do is research target markets through Manus AI, and Manus AI is great for, researching particular pain points and statistics that are accurate so that we can actually base this upon our further processes and start reaching out to these clients. And then what we start to do is we have these prospecting tools and services that we use. Today we're just going to be using Apollo and Apify, but typically you can also use any mail finder as a service as well to scrape emails from decision makers. And I'll walk through how these work in a minute, but these are the services that we use. And I put an arrow here to connecting it to a qualifying step because these kind of go hand in hand. Depending on how exactly you scrape the information, you will decide whether or not you actually need a qualification step, because like it or not, this is a top of the funnel outreach strategy. So many times we try to overcomplicate the qualification process of, trying to find out if the lead has the budget or any other qualification parameters. But the main thing we got to look at is just optimizing the prospecting and the information that we get from this, so that rather than having a conversation with the user or having like really strict qualification processes, we can just look at, these sort of numbers put in. So for example, the number of people that come through as a result of these and the time in the market, and then this kind of influences the outreach method that we try to use. So hopefully that makes sense for you. And then once we have qualified these, then there's usually an enrichment process. So we want our emails to be as personalized as possible, and the way that we do that is we research more about the company. But in this video, we're actually trying to do so in the fastest and most optimized way possible. So bear in mind, we usually do this with perplexity step, which researches, more about the company and the person themselves. But since we're prospecting and sourcing out this information in the first place so well, we're actually going to scratch this enrichment phase, and it's going to be done by ChatGPT themselves from the information that we pull in from Apify. And I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. And then the final step is just personalizing it, which, you have to choose a platform. So it's either email or LinkedIn. Maybe if they're super qualified to some stage, you want to apply that to your LinkedIn as well. And then the LLMs that would be in charge of that would be either ChatGPT or Claude to personalize the whole thing. Unless, of course, you use a platform like Instantly, which we do, but this is just here for in case you don't have it. So let's move on and let me show you what Apollo looks like and how it works. So Apollo is a huge database that is scraped from LinkedIn Sales Navigator that's got a whole bunch of information about a lot of different companies. So as you can see here, I have this URL that it contains all the parameters of the companies that we are looking for. So in our case, we are looking for insurance agencies, but this virtually works for any company. And the way that we do that is just by toggling this navigator tool here and filtering the information in through here. And so just to give you a little context of what that looks like, we are looking for directors, CEOs and founders within New Zealand, Australia, US, and Canada in the insurance space. And then we're excluding life insurance. We have all of these qualification parameters, which is why we're scraping them so well. We don't actually need a further qualification step. And then this turns out to be this URL here, which if I copy and paste it into this Apollo search bar here, we get the exact same result because this includes all of those parameters that I was talking about before. Now, once you get to this point, it's actually very expensive to export this out of your Apollo account into a CRM or a database or anything you like. So what we are actually going to do is we're going to use another service to scrape this data. So essentially we are scraping the scraper off Sales Navigator. And we are doing that with Apify. You can think of Apify as a huge marketplace for scrapers that you can use for all sorts of information. So if I go to Apify store here, you can see that there's all these sort of scrapers. These are the ones that they suggest, but you have website content scrapers, they have crawlers and TikTok scrapers and whatnot. but the one that we are using today is the Apollo scraper. You see that I've already put a URL here, and this is the exact URL that we pulled in from here that we would have had to export, and which would cost a lot of money. But instead, Apify allows us to scrape all of this by just putting in a URL here. And once you sign in, I think they give you $5 credit for free. So this is essentially you are getting 1,000 leads, $1 per 1,000 leads. And once you sign up, they have the $5 for free. So essentially you're doing this for free, right? Now the point that we get to a little bit further in the video about transitioning this into a Make.com scenario does require a subscription. You can do it manually. I will get into that in a second. But as you can see, I've put in this URL and I ran it in order to get these results here. So as you can see, I actually had to abort this because we're getting so many results. If you look back on this page here, we were expecting a total of 6,170 total leads. And from the Apify scraper, I saw that it had over 6,400 results. So this is what we're going to have to account for in Make.com when we build our scenario and scrape these last leads. So just for a bit of context, this is exactly what I did to scrape them over here. And now all that we're doing is getting in that same batch of 6,000 and taking another 1,000 and enriching them with our Make.com scenario. And bear in mind that this is something that you can run, all 6,000 at once and enrich all of them and put all that time or whatever up front. It would just take a lot longer to do so. And the reason I do them in chunks of 1,000 is because we can only send up to 1,000 per week. With our current setup on instantly. So I just like to have this huge pool that I iterate over time and then scrape them and enrich them from there. But without further ado, let's get into making the Make.com scenario. Okay, so bear in mind that from this point you need an API key on Apify, and that you can only get if you have the subscription method. So what you would do if you wanted to do this completely for free is to go over to Apify and export this. You got an exporting button over here, and then you'd import it back into a Google Sheet, and then you'd clean up all the data as you'd want it, because there's obviously huge chunks of data. You'd find what's relevant to you, and then you'd run a Google Sheet webhook from Make.com to then start processing them from there. So the first module we're going to select here is going to be this get dataset items from Apify, and you can see here in this dataset ID field, we have to get the specific data set that we generated from this run here of 6,000 people, and we can find that by going into storage and then dataset ID over here. So we're going to copy that and paste it over here. We want the data to be clean, a JSON format, and a limit of, we'll do 1,000 people. Now from this point, remember that we've got this original list to deal with. Maybe you won't have to, but what I like to do is always check for doubles in the list that we get. And you saw before we have 6,100 potential leads, but we got 6.4K results, so always check for doubles. And the way we do that is by going into search rows on the Google Sheet. We're going to be referencing this Google Sheet here. So that is called lead gen, and we're going to filter through the LinkedIn URL, which comes as data from the Apify scraper. Obviously everyone has their own LinkedIn URL, so if we find that there is one with the exact same value as the information that is getting fed through, then we'll know it's a double. Okay, so to map this, I actually need to run the Apify scraper. So what this is going to do is just pull in all that data that we just referenced on the Apify over here. Now that we've done that, we can come back over here and click LinkedIn URL. And as a filter here, because I've already run the first 1,000, what I'm going to do is make sure that the particular index is greater than 1,000. And just thinking back, that means that we have to increase our limit, and we'll just do 2,000. So that isolates the next 1,000 that I'm going to scrape and enrich. Now from here, we're going to feed this information to a ChatGPT module. And I don't know if this is cheating or not, but I'm going to use the one that I usually use for these scenarios. Cool, so I've pasted this over here, and I'll just walk through exactly what this module does and how it works. So as a developer in the system, I've got you are intelligent and helpful copywriting a system. This is followed by a user message, which is instructing to write an icebreaker for a cold email campaign and use the provided data from the employment history of the leads. So what we're doing on Apify's end is getting their employment history, and we're going to use that as our personalized line, which is how we can actually generate these so cheaply and so quickly. And I've got these guidelines over here saying your tone of voice should be casual, like a bar conversation, look for plausible but vague connections about me wherever possible. And you'll see down below I've got some information about me if those points are there to be made. Respond in JSON, no exclamation points, always start with hey, first name. Acknowledge something by starting with love that or love how. So this gets us like a nice consistency, and it's also a nice way to compliment. I've got this point here, so abbreviating names when you refer to companies, so broad range instead of broad range benefits group. If the history isn't very long, mention something about how long they've been running their company instead, and then make an acknowledgement through that instead. So that kind of covers all of that, and then I have these connection points, so the about me section, and I've got, I think entrepreneurship is about grit more than anything. I make YouTube videos. I started entrepreneurship at a young age. I'm into sport. I love sales more than anything in a business. So it's going to be looking for all of these connection points, and if something kind of clicks, then it's actually going to acknowledge that in the icebreaker message. So this is just me giving it some examples. This is going to be sort of the information that is fed through it. And then at the end here, I reference everything. So from Appify, we get a whole bunch of information that we don't need about the employment history. So it's just getting rid of the ID, organization ID, and the key, which is a whole bunch of numbers that we don't need. So we're just gonna map this really quickly. So we are providing it with the full name of the person and then the whole employment history array there. We're going to save that. And we have to set up this little filter here. Obviously from the checking for doubles, we have to look at it and see that the total number of bundles equals 0, because if it equals 0, then it means that it doesn't exist. Now from this point, what I wanted to do is add it into a new list where I can actually start this new campaign. So instead of having a new Google Sheet, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a new one and duplicate this one here. I'm going to make a new tab full of everything. I gotta get rid of all this information first. Cool, now I've got this nice clean sheet looking to be filled in by the results of the automation. Now what we've got to do is make a new Google Sheet module here. We're going to reference that new tab that I put in. So that's that there, copy of sheet 1. And now we're going to map all of the information that we need. Cool, so I've mapped all these fields here, so the LinkedIn, the employees count, whatever, even their phone number in case we choose to do something else in the future with it. Now that for the icebreaker, what we need, since we get a JSON result from the ChatGPT module, what we need from here is just to run the module once and then map it over here, just as we did with the Appify. So I'm gonna paste in that dummy information there. See that we get a result, and now we can just map that over here. Cool, and just like that, we can simply run our automation and then see how long it takes to get all of this new tab here filled in. So right now it's 1:33. We'll see how long it took to do everything. Okay, so right now it is 2 p.m. and the automation is just completed. We've run through 1,000 records and 996 came through ChatGPT, which means we had 4 doubles, which is no biggie, but I don't want those in your copy as well. So that effectively took just a bit under 30 minutes, so that's great. And if you look over here, we can see that this tab is full of stuff, full of enriched leads, and we get all of these personalized icebreakers, which we then append to the beginning of our copy. So if the copy is talking about whatever you talk about in my email copy, the first sentences would be something like, "Hey Britt, love how you shifted from sales agent days to mutual of Omaha to founding generous, takes real grit to build like that since 2019. So if someone sees that at the start of your copy, they immediately think, oh, this guy took a few minutes to look at me and before reaching out to me trying to sell his stuff. And you can see we've done that all over the place. So this exact automation will be available to you in the description below to implement and use yourself now that you understand how it works and how you can make this part of your selling process much more optimized. If you're a business owner wanting to implement solutions like this, we specialize in top of the funnel and middle of the funnel solutions to optimize your sales pipeline using AI automations. So if you want to get in touch with us directly, then feel free to use the booking link in the description. But other than that, that's it for the video, and I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.